Joe Minimum, I like that, Joe Minimum. Not in Iowa. Joe Biden got that intro bump, but that lead that Joe Biden had in Iowa has shrunk to zero. Let's talk about it. This is not going to be a long one, but I do want to talk about it. I want to talk about why, because I think there's a specific reason for why. Welcome to Late Night at the Soapbox. So let's talk about this one poll. Now, I have to be honest. Polls this far out, I don't necessarily give them that much weight because, this is still going to be a year. Also, these candidates are going to have to be on a stage and actually talk to human beings, and people are going to be able to evaluate. And keep in mind, this is primary, so these people tend to be a little bit more glued into this stuff. Now, Joe Biden has a clear delineation of geriatrics that love him to bits. I strongly suspect that they love him bits because Joe Biden has just been around forever and he's a comfortable character. It's like when you see, what's the guy name? The one that let's use Shaq. Like when you see Shaq selling Preparation H, and it's like, I remember Shaq. That guy used to play basketball. I trust that guy. I remember that guy. Or Ed McMahon. I remember that guy. He used to sit on the couch for like 30 years. It's the knowing the person. They mistaken familiarity with actually policy. There's a difference in those things. What do you want? You actually want somebody to get some work done, or you just want somebody because you think you know that person. I've said it and I stand by it. I think Joe Biden is a weak candidate. Joe Biden, especially in the primaries, especially in the primaries, Joe Biden is going to have to stand on that debate stage and he's going to have to tell a crowd that is significantly moved to the left and that only real credit that they give him is this notion of electability. And he's going to say, I'm not for pot legalization. I'm sketchy on this notion of abortion. And yeah, I thought they should cut Social Security. Like, this is the stuff that he's going to have to get on stage and defend because this is the stuff he said. He's going to have to defend that racist crime bill, that vote for the Iraq war, this neocon tendencies that he has. He's going to have to defend that stuff on a stage where people have moved decidedly to the left. And God, I hope Michael Grayson is on that stage with him. You have no idea. You have no idea. Do you realize the extent that I wanted Ted Cruz to lose is almost similar to the extent that I want Mike Gravel to be on that stage? And I know it doesn't necessarily give you any additional information because you would have to know my mental state going along with this notion of Ted Cruz failing. But you can watch those videos and tell everything in me wanted Ted Cruz to lose that race. You have no idea. I watched that election with bated breath. Every number, every increment, every moment that Beto was up, I was like, yes, make him lose. It was, you have no idea the thrill that I would have received with Ted Cruz looking into the camera, conceding. I lost. You won. You beat me. You're the better man. But that didn't happen. Ted Cruz beat him. All right, so let's go to this. Joe Biden's lead shrinks to 0 against Bernie Sanders in critical Iowa. Joe Biden may be leading in the national polls, but Democratic voters, but a new poll shows his dominance doesn't necessarily extend to Iowa. Mr. Biden is matched by Bernie Sanders in the state with a sharp drop from his 11-point lead in a separate poll last month. He went from 11 points to 0. Both candidates can claim 24% of the vote in the state. All right, now here's the thing. Two things. I have no idea who's the second candidate if Biden falls away. Meaning, I don't know who's a potential dark horse. And this assuming my own political acumen is on point. I honestly believe that the youth vote and the independent vote are going to be heavily featured in this election coming up with Sanders, even in the primaries. And those two factors are going to create somewhat of a, let's say polls, I don't think are factoring that in. The youth vote is going to be the main vote coming up this year, and that's somewhat of an anomaly. That's not something that typically takes place, but it will happen this year. If the polls aren't weighted for that, then the polls are going to be somewhat skewed. I'm not all that concerning about the polls right now, but there is a certain chest thump factor and public perception when you get polls going in a particular direction. People have this notion of groupthink. Bernie Sanders, I think part of the reason this is taking place is because Bernie Sanders released a farm plan which is directly going to affect these rural states, Iowa in particular. Bernie Sanders' plan expands agriculture and rural policies. So part of this has to do with him trying to help independent farmers, and not just independent farmers, trying to help these guys move over to a more sustainable farming practice. You have no idea how much I love this. I've argued on this show multiple times, and I think argued correctly, that West Virginia was screwed magnificently. West Virginia powered the nation dealing with issues of coal. And now they're 48% poorest in the country, if I'm not mistaken. Like I think like 25% or more for poverty of their kids. I mean, it's an astonishing betrayal of sorts. And then the secondary thing of, browbeating these guys because they vote Republicans. Yes, they vote Republicans because Republicans say there's no such thing as climate change. Or at the very least, if there is, they don't care about it. Which means they can continue to do coal. Even though it's a dying industry, they can continue to do coal. They only care about that because that's their living. That's the way they feed their family. That's the way they feed their kids. Any plan, meaning if a Democrat honestly, was talking about this notion of, all right, we're going to decrease the amount of coal that's being generated, then in doing so, you had to make sure that those people were taken care of. And not in a bullshit way, but in a serious, real way where you carried them from point A to point B to ensure that they were intact as you changed over industries. Not only did the companies that were there in West Virginia screw those people over, meaning expropriated the wealth out of the country while getting all of this labor, but you had the secondary effect that when they deprioritized coal, they took the hit. Why are you allowing the people in your society to take a hit? And by the way, if you allow them to take a hit, why do you think these guys get radicalized in regards to pushing for right-wingers? Why do you think they push for right-wingers? They want to be able to feed their families. Yeah, I like this environmental stuff, man, but I got to eat. The same thing is true with the farming thing. If you want these guys to put over to sustainable farming practices, you're going to have to help them in that process, especially if there's an expense associated with doing so, especially since it is the government that is prodding them to change those farming practices. Yes, we should help them in what they're doing. And I like the fact that he's pushing with this notion of helping and securing independent farmers and assisting farmers, not these mega corporations, but is assisting farmers. Even in the way Sanders is talking about the trade deals, Sanders is talking about trade deals going after Trump, but saying, look, it doesn't have to be a dog eat dog. There could be a win-win, and it doesn't have to be a win-win for corporations. Oftentimes, the president, corporations are writing trade bills. Who do you think a corporation is going to write a trade bill to advantage? Do you honestly believe people who ship job overseas and bring that, the goods back into the country, many of those companies that Donald Trump is talking about, this trade deficit, are American companies? In fact, if I'm not mistaken, half are American companies. So, who do you think they're writing that stuff for? You would think that the president will be working in your best interests, but not so much. If Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, they're going to have a conniption fit, because the billionaires that have taken over and cannibalized the Democratic Party that used to be Republicans but realize they can essentially take both if they're putting money in their pockets, they are going to have a fit. If you remember, Schultz said the only reason he was getting into the race is because AOC was talking about a tax. She's talking about taxing my wages. I need to stop them. I'll leave this here. This one wasn't meant to be long. It was just pointing out that Bernie Sanders has a new farm package that essentially is going to try to help subsidize these guys to move towards more sustainable practices. Also, one last thing. There was research. I remember this. I don't have the article at my fingertips, but they found that if they changed the fooding component of the cows, meaning if they changed the stuff that the cows ate, the cows produce less CO2. If I'm not mistaken, by like 90%. Amazing. I don't know if they know that. I don't know if they're going to use that. But one aspect that needs to be tackled also is this notion that animal ag is 50% of climate change. Like, everybody always hits oil and gas, and everybody leaves out animal agriculture. Cool Blue. 3 reasons why Joe Biden would need to be president of the United States. 1, no member of Congress who voted for the Vietnam or Iraq wars was elected president of the United States. I didn't know that. That's amazing. No former VP unseated an incumbent POTUS. And Biden opposes Medicare for all. Well, just because something has never happened doesn't necessarily mean that's indicative of something definitely taking place in the future. But I get your point. I understand what you mean. It's an uphill climb. McCarthy losing out. Biden is a socialist. But let him tell it. Let him tell it. You fucking around tell you a communist if it helps him get votes. Yeah. All right. I'll end this here. If you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, everyone. And by the way, liking the videos do help. But only like it if you like it. It's like, don't give me bad information in regards to the videos. All right, guys. Thanks all.